Solitaraica is, as you could guess by the name, a card game, this being part of an emerging subgenre of roguelike card games, also known as roguelike deck building, which is a more correct and accurate title for what these games usually play like. Which, if you think about it, it makes sense given card games are naturally very random, and so a video gamifying that, you almost naturally create the setting for a roguelike, and then giving you the ability to build on that deck and try and not only make yourself stronger but also try and minimize the randomness. I was interested in playing this game given my growing interest in the genre after really enjoying this other game called Slay the Spire and also another called Dicey Dungeons. I also wanted to play this other game called Griftlands, but alas, that one is still in early access. But we're not here to talk about those games. We are here to talk about Solitairica, which I got for free during the past year's Christmas 15 days of free games on Epic, where I'm sure this game went under the radar for a lot of people given the other higher profile games that were given away. But for me, this was the only one I have yet to install and play out of the games given away. Of course, aside the ones I have already finished, for example Night in the Woods, which I have already reviewed on this channel. Then what is this game actually like to play? Well, we must address the deck building aspect. That it doesn't really have one, since cards have to be the same as playing cards going from 2 to 10 and then the jacks, the queens, the king and the ace. The name Solitairica might be reminiscent of the name Solitaire, and in fact on Steam you can even buy this game bundled with other solitaire games. But the gameplay is more akin to a reverse, where instead of trying to remove cards starting from the aces in order, here you remove depending on the card you draw, being that you can create a sequence where you can always pick a card number that is subsequently right after or right before the card you drawn. And with this you can make large sequences which not only help you beat the game given the objective is to clear the board, but also give a money reward for large sequences. Given you cannot build or modify your deck here, the money you'll gain will be used to buy items and spells to help with the randomness. The items will give you a continuous effect like giving you an extra life or armor or even stun the enemy. Options wise, these will get better as the game goes on. The spells are well spells, you can use them during gameplay and using them costs energy. And there are 4 types of spells which each use a certain type of energy. These fall into types. For example, willpower spells are for the most part for healing, and defense spells are well for creating shields. Store you can access to buy these things during gameplay, and while there is some randomness, even there is only a few spells and items to pick from at any given visit, but the quality and price of the items will regardless go up as the game session progresses. You can also buy extra lives here, which is a nice to have in a game that has so much up to chance. The big problem I have with these items is that some of them are just way better than others, and I don't mean like one gives 2 armor at the beginning of the game and then one later on gives you 3. That's fine. But then there's stuff that's just so OP regardless of what kind of build you're going for. For example, this one item lets you see every card that's on the second row, as in the one behind the one that's already visible. And in a game based on making sequences, that's insanely overpowered. And I have yet to lose a game every time I get lucky enough to find that item and be able to buy it. I think these overpowered items and spells are best when they're made for a certain deck. For example, there is this one spell that can destroy an entire column. It's very OP, especially against enemies that try to make big columns or bunch all the columns together. But this spell costs a lot of attack energy, and therefore it only really works in a deck that's focused on attack. And I think doing that makes these OP moves a lot more balanced, or at least it makes you think a lot more of when you can fit them into your build. Now, I said early on that you could not change your deck, and you can't, but you can pick from different types of decks. This won't have a different cards, but the cards you will pull out will have certain energies, meaning you know when playing with that deck that you'll have a certain amount of specific types of energy, allowing you to build your deck around that. These decks can be unlocked using the other currency you get from playing the game. Usually this will be handed out at the end of a round, not having to have beaten it, but of course winning does mean higher rewards. There is a deck for each energy and also a deck for each combination of 2 energies, meaning there is 10 decks in total. Using this currency you can also upgrade each deck's ace, queen and queen. Ace is always giving you 3 energy of the type of the ace you pulled, and then the power of the queen and the king can vary from deck to deck, as these decks also have their unique spells that add some variety to how it's played. And you can also unlock how many items you can use in a run, which I personally think it's kinda lame. I wish that was just you buy it once and it works for every single deck, since it is a thing you want in all decks. And it feels very jarring going from one deck to another if it isn't fully upgraded, as it does only really limit how good of a build you can do. And finally, this currency can also be used to buy lives, which honestly I was surprised to find out it isn't a microtransaction in the mobile version of this game, thankfully, but I'll address the mobile version of this game at the end of the video. It also gives this currency some purpose once you've fully unlocked and upgraded all of the decks, which honestly should not take too long. Now to the actual gameplay. You have a health bar and you have to clear the board before the enemy damages you enough and your health reaches 0. But the enemy won't just attack you, they will also try to deter you from finishing the board by adding cards or giving cards armor or spikes that will damage you if you try to sequence them. The way it works is when you draw a card, the enemy draws one as well, except his card is not a numbered card but an effect card that will determine what it does, kinda like a spell. My biggest problem with this system is, one, there isn't a huge variety of things the enemy can do besides making bigger damage or stunning you. And I mean, not to be splitting hairs here, but what's the difference between a frozen card and a bearded one? They both do the same thing, they stop you from destroying them in one hit, making it 2. Even the armored cards only change that from 2 to 3. There isn't a whole variety of things the enemy can do, and this ends up being a big problem in terms of the differentiation of the enemies. Regardless of these small gimmicks they may have, most of them won't be that different to fight from each other, diminishing the amount of consideration you might have on your build when going into a fight. And this is only made worse as the game goes on. Unless you have a really bad luck with your upgrades, most of the final harder enemies will actually be the easier ones. And that's annoying because I mostly just found myself dying at the beginning because of a bad luck. Very often in the beginning of the game it's easy to just get attacked multiple times in a row without having any way to defend yourself, just because of some bad luck draws. And if you can get over that, then you will likely have a build good enough to beat the game halfway through the run, making the game kind of a bore from then on. In my personal experience, I found that by round 10 I was usually not really buying anything or changing anything unless one of those really OP spells or items showed up, which I guess it's fine. It makes sense mechanically, but in my experience it just made the final, supposedly harder enemies a bit of a bore to get through, and there just aren't that many different strategies to pull with these enemies, even with the more diverse and unique decks, which can be fun to try out. And now addressing the epic difficulty you can unlock after beating a deck on normal. only really makes the runs longer rather than harder, which just doesn't help at all with the problems I have with this game. That being said, it shouldn't be understated how satisfactory it is to make a long sequence and to get your deck to that perfect build that just destroys harder enemies. Much like other games in this genre, the moment-to-moment gameplay is very enjoyable, where pulling a really long sequence is very satisfactory on its own and also giving you a real advantage in the game, as collecting cards gives you energy. And I found myself coming back each day and just doing a single run. And for that reason, I think it works really well as a mobile game. The mobile version of this game is free and it doesn't have microtransactions. The way it works is it doesn't give you all the decks and has you paying $4 if you want to unlock them all. The other decks are also available in the PC version. But the thing is, it's still cheaper than the PC version at $10. And honestly, from my experience, it is very much the same experience gameplay wise. And I think it improves it a lot just by virtue of being a mobile game. Meaning you can just pull it out and play for a bit while you're out and about and just go for a few rounds rather than doing a whole run, which fixes some of the problems of a run becoming somewhat boring towards the end, which to be fair can also be done on PC since the game does save after every draw, but the experience isn't the same, I think. Finally, before I reach a conclusion, let me just talk about some of the more technical aspects. Visually, it is very nice and it has a very cartoony look, and it's definitely a lot nicer to look at than actual Solitaire. But also, once you beat the game, you've seen it all, which is fine for this type of game, but you're definitely not gonna get any crazy surprises like you would in, say, Slay the Spire, for example. And soundtrack wise, it's fine and pleasing, but it's also again lacking in variety. There is basically one song that will just play forever. Very quickly did I find myself turning off the music, the in-game music, and just playing my own. And regardless of what I have said so far, I feel like I came off somewhat negative in this review, but I did really like this game. There is an addictive quality and I'll probably keep playing it on my phone until Slay the Spire gets a release on Android. And I'm giving this one, Soliterica, a 7 out of 10. In terms of recommendations, I'll say if you get it for free, then give it a try. If not, then play the mobile version for free and then buy it if you feel like you'll get enough out of it. But if PC is your only option, then $10 is fair for this type of game, and it's pretty low in general for a game without a discount. So yeah, regardless of your decision, I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope you decide to subscribe and even leave a like. And once again, regardless of that decision, goodbye.